Back in the summer of 1947, though, something happened that I'll never forget. A day that started like any other turned into the strangest experience of my life. Some folks would call me crazy, but I know what I saw out there. It was a hot, dry afternoon, the kind where the air seems to shimmer in front of you. I was tending to my crops, minding my own business, when I noticed something strange off in the distance. I'd heard about the area near my farm, being close to some government land, what folks call Area 51, but I never paid it much attention. The military was always testing things out there, but they kept to themselves, and I kept to myself. I glanced up, just wiping the sweat from my brow, when I saw something streak across the sky. Not just one thing, but three. Fast, too. Faster than any plane or anything I'd ever seen before. They were silver, almost like discs, and they shimmered in the sunlight. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just the heat playing tricks on my eyes, but then it became real clear. Those weren't planes. They were moving in a way that no aircraft should, zigzagging across the sky like they were playing a game of tag. I watched, frozen in place, as the three objects raced across the sky. They were moving erratically, like they were out of control. Suddenly, the first one dropped from the sky, spiraling downward like a leaf in the wind. My stomach sank as I realized it was going to crash. It wasn't far from the boundary line of the restricted area, maybe a mile or two beyond where I stood. The second one followed suit not long after, but this one went down faster, almost like it was shot out of the air. It plummeted straight into the ground with a thunderous crash, and I swear I felt the earth shake beneath my feet, even from miles away. The third one, though, was the strangest of them all. It didn't fall right away. It hovered for a second, like it was struggling to stay in the air, but eventually it too lost control and came down hard, though a little further off from the others, my mind racing to make sense of what I just witnessed. 3 crashes, 3 strange flying objects, all in the span of just a few minutes. I didn't have time to think, though, because the next thing I knew, I heard the rumble of engines. Military trucks, dozens of them, barreling down the dirt roads toward the crash sites. I knew better than to get involved with the military, especially with whatever secretive business they had going on out there, but my curiosity got the best of me. I slipped behind an old rickety fence on my property that overlooked the valley where 2 of the objects had come down. I crouched low, making sure I wasn't seen, and peered through the slats of the fence. The military trucks arrived quickly, a small army of soldiers jumping out, all dressed in uniforms and moving with purpose. They weren't wasting any time. It was clear that whatever had crashed, they wanted to get it cleaned up fast. But that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. As the soldiers approached the wreckage of the closest object, I noticed something lying on the ground near the debris. At first, I thought it was just part of the wreckage, but then I realized those were bodies, small, gray bodies with long limbs and oversized heads. Some of them weren't moving, clearly dead from the crash, but there were others, still alive, writhing on the ground as if they were trying to crawl away. My breath caught in my throat. These weren't people. These were creatures, aliens. There was no doubt in my mind. The soldiers didn't seem shocked. In fact, they moved with military precision, gathering up the bodies, both dead and alive, and loading them into the trucks. I watched, my heart racing, as they moved swiftly, collecting every scrap of debris, every piece of wreckage. The whole scene felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare. I could barely believe my own eyes, but there was no denying what I was seeing. As the military convoy packed up and prepared to leave, I ducked down lower behind the fence, praying they wouldn't notice me. The last thing I needed was to get caught snooping on whatever top-secret operation this was. My heart pounded in my ears as I watched the trucks rumble away, kicking up dust as they disappeared into the distance. I waited until the sound of the engines faded into the distance before I dared to move. My legs were stiff, and my hands were shaking as I slowly stood up, still trying to process everything I'd just witnessed. But something in me told me I had to see more. I had to get closer. So, against my better judgment, I crept down toward the crash site. The air was still thick with dust and the smell of burning metal. The ground was scorched where the object had hit, and the wreckage was scattered across the field. I moved cautiously, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of life, but the military had done a thorough job. They'd cleaned up almost everything. Almost. That's when I saw it. Lying in the dirt, half buried under a pile of rubble, was a piece of metal unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was smooth and shiny, but not like any metal I knew. It was light, almost too light, and when I bent down to pick it up, it felt warm to the touch, like it was still alive somehow. I turned it over in my hands, studying the strange markings etched into the surface. This was no ordinary metal. This was something otherworldly. I slipped the metal into my pocket and stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where the crash had happened, my mind spinning with 1,000 questions. What had I just witnessed? Who or what were those creatures? And why had the military been so quick to cover it all up? I knew I had to be careful. Whatever had happened out there, the government didn't want anyone knowing about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just seen something that wasn't meant for human eyes. I had seen the truth, and there was no going back. As I made my way back to the farmhouse, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting a military truck to come barreling down the road, ready to haul me off for what I'd seen. But no one came. The night was eerily quiet, as if the world had returned to normal, but I knew better. I locked the metal away in a drawer. I was unsure of what to do with it. Part of me wanted to tell someone, anyone, about what I had seen. But the other part of me knew that no one would believe me. Who would believe a simple farmer claiming to have seen aliens and crashed spacecraft? Days passed, and I kept to myself, but I couldn't stop thinking about that day. The sight of those bodies, the strange metallic wreckage, the military's frantic cleanup, it all haunted me. I knew what I had seen was real, but the world had gone on as if nothing had happened. Weeks later, the newspapers ran a story claiming that a weather balloon had crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. A weather balloon. I almost laughed when I read it. It was a cover-up, plain and simple. But the rest of the world seemed to accept it, moving on with their lives while I sat on the truth. I still have that piece of metal. I keep it hidden away, a reminder of that day in 1947 when I saw something that no one was ever supposed to see. I may be just a farmer, but I know what I saw, and it wasn't a weather balloon. It was something far more mysterious, far more dangerous. And every night when I look up at the stars, I wonder if they're still out there, watching, waiting, just beyond our reach.